I've been dying to do this review for so long, and I am so excited to be able to do it now. I finally just finished this book, I believe, 2 weeks ago, and I'm finally getting to review it. And this is the second book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. If you have not read the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, I wouldn't recommend watching this video because there's a very big chance I'll probably mention spoilers while reviewing it. So if you have not read A Court of Thorns and Roses yet, I'd recommend to leave now. I do have a review on A Court of Thorns and Roses, so if you'd like to check that out, so you have more of an insight of what this series is all about, I will link it somewhere on the screen. If you have read this book, feel free to keep watching, and I will have a spoilery section at the end of this video. So if you have not read this book yet, you don't have to watch the spoilery section, and I'll let you know when that section does come up. So anyway, let's get started on my review with A Court of Mist and Fury. So this book takes place, I believe, about 3 months after A Court of Thorns and Roses left off. Feyre is living with Tamlin in the Spring Court, and they are actually engaged and are about to get married, so she is planning this wedding and getting ready for it. Meanwhile, there's other conflicts going on with the Spring Court, so Tamlin and Lucien are out taking care of that, and Feyre is just stuck in Tamlin's manor. And Tamlin really isn't letting her go out and fight with him. He's being very protective over her and insisting that she stay in the manor, which Feyre doesn't like at all. She wants to be out protecting the Spring Court and fighting, because since she is now turned into Fae, she has all these new powers and she's wanting to use them, but Tamlin is being very protective over her and doesn't believe that she is able to protect the Spring Court in any way. But Feyre is stuck at home and she is really not liking that, and there comes a point when Tamlin is pushing her past her limit. So that is when Rhysand comes to play, and she decides to go and help Rhysand with this threat that he put on his city. And so this book basically is all about how she's getting along with Rhysand and her trying to protect his city and the Night Court and all of that. And so my thoughts on this book initially, I have so many unpopular opinions about this book actually. I honestly like A Court of Thorns and Roses better than this one. A lot of people love the second book so much more, but there's something about A Court of Thorns and Roses that gave me just this, it's a feeling that's kind of hard to explain. It gave me just this like magical feeling that I didn't really get out of this book at all. I knew initially, because I loved A Court of Thorns and Roses so much, that it was going to be really hard for the second book to live up to as much as I loved the first one. So for that reason alone, I was kind of going into this thinking I'm probably not going to like it as much as I loved the first book. Going with the fact also that I 90% of the time don't love sequels of books more than I love the first book. But that being said, this book was still totally awesome. It was epic. It had so much action. Just this amazing, when I say amazing, it is so amazing. This amazing romance in it that just, it was so steamy and it was just absolutely perfect. And I was left very entertained by this book, and it was worth reading a lot. I loved all the new characters that were in the Night Court. They were each so interesting. They were each their own person. You got kind of a little backstory on pretty much all of them. And I knew going into this book that I was completely going to fall in love with Rhysand. I did not love him in A Court of Thorns and Roses because he was super shady, and I just had this feeling that he was up to no good. But I did know going into this that this book wasn't going to be focused more on Tamlin, that it was going to be mostly have Rhysand in it, and I just knew that Sarah was going to make me fall in love with this character because she tends to do that a lot in the Throne of Glass series. There were characters that I didn't particularly love that I did fall in love with later on, so I just knew I was going to love Rhysand, and let me tell you, yes, I did. I absolutely love his character now. He is so amazing. I still do really love Tamlin, and that's also an unpopular opinion because most people don't like him in this book at all, but I still love him as a character, and I think I love Tamlin and Rhysand pretty much on the same level now, And so I was really glad I got to fall in love with this character, and he had so much backstory in this book, and I'm really glad that we got to see a lot of why he does what he does, and just his character is just amazing. He has this insane love for his people of the Night Court and his city, and he's so devoted to protecting him, and that's kind of a side of him that we didn't get to see in A Court of Thorns and Roses, how he is just so, I guess, loving and just willing to protect the people he loves so much and just sacrifice himself just willingly, and I just absolutely love him for that now. One of my favorite male characters now. I absolutely just love him, and yeah, I can go on and on about him. He's just completely amazing. Last thing I really liked about this book is we got to see different courts. We only got to see two other than the spring court. We got to see the night court, of course, and we also got to see a little bit of the summer court, which I found the summer court to be just absolutely captivating. The way it was described, it just sounded so beautiful, and that is one court that I would just love to visit, as well as the night court. I absolutely loved how she described it. It just sounded so like magical, and I am hoping that in the third book we will get to see possibly all the courts. I think that would be totally amazing because I'm really interested to see how the rest of the courts work. So those were the things I really loved about The Court of Mist and Fury. Now going into things that I didn't like, I did have some problems with it, unfortunately. The thing I didn't like was parts of Feyre's character. I love Feyre as a character. She was amazing in A Court of Thorns and Roses. There were some parts in the sequel, though, that I didn't like about her. What I really didn't like was how she was being very, I feel like, unreasonable and just so stubborn. Like, she's a stubborn character to begin with, but it was getting very annoying in this book because she got faced with a problem or someone upsetted her, she would just run away from it. Like, she wouldn't solve her problems, she'd just give up. And that really disappointed me about her because I feel like if you do have a problem, the best thing to do if you are known as a strong character is to try to work through it, and she just tended to just run away from her problems. I won't say what the problems were because it's probably a spoiler, but I will get into it in the spoilery section of this video. But I found that just very annoying with her, and it didn't exactly ruin her character for me, but it left me kind of disappointed in her because she should be strong enough to work through her problems, and I just found it very annoying. And really, that's basically the only thing that I didn't like about the book, besides the fact that it didn't give me this like kind of magical feeling that I got from A Court of Thorns and Roses. But other than that, it was so good. The plot was confusing at times, but I'm kind of biased to that because, you know, I don't pick up on fantasy books very easily, but I still found the plot captivating, and I found the relationships so amazing, and the romance was great, and so yeah, it was great. Not, in my opinion, not as great as A Court of Thorns and Roses was, but I still absolutely just loved it. So I did give this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Because of the issues I had with it, I was going to give it 4 stars, but there was a point in this book where I, no joke, cried. Like, I got really emotional, and I came to like this conclusion that if a book can make me cry, because sometimes it's kind of hard for me to get that emotional and to cry with books, if it can be able to do that, I will automatically give it at least a half star up. So for that reason, because it got me emotional, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, which means I still really loved it. Okay, so now I'm going to get into spoilers. So if you have not read A Court of Mist and Fury yet, I recommend you to please leave now so I don't spoil you on anything. But if you have read it, then feel free to stay, and so let's just get started. Okay, first thing I want to talk about, I loved how this book represented PTSD so realistically, because once Feyre came out from her time under the mountain, which was, of course, a pretty traumatic time for her, she really fell into a depression. She panicked a lot, and I found that very realistic because that's kind of how PTSD is. And throughout it, I was just hoping she would get better because she was feeling really down about herself, even though she was with the person she loved. which was Tamlin, she was just completely just depressed, which is so understandable because what she went through under that mountain was so just would cause a lot of stress on you and just anxiety, and I could completely understand where she was coming from. And I'm glad throughout the rest of the book that she did seem like she was getting better. And so now I'm going to get into Tamlin. Of course, as I said, I really still do love Tamlin, but he did have really bad issues in this book. I'd say most of the time he was pretty stupid. He did really stupid things in this book. I felt like he wasn't really understanding how Feyre was feeling after being under the mountain. I think he was kind of blind to how she was having like post-traumatic stress disorder. He wasn't really getting that, and I don't think he was very like sympathetic to her at all. And the point that she wanted to be outside and she wanted to fight with him and to make herself useful and not be locked in a house all day. I wish she would have kind of eased back on the being so protective over her, because really she helped you under the mountain. She saved your life, and no known human could ever survive under the mountain, and she like came out alive and well, even though she did actually die under the mountain before she became a fairy, I guess. So I'm not really right about that. But she proved herself to be a strong character under the mountain, and he just didn't believe in her at all. And I felt like he was being so stupid about that. And especially when he locked her up in his house, I was like, that was the worst idea you could ever done, because she's already having so much anxiety, and to have been locked as a prisoner in a house really sent her over the edge. And I just wish he would have been more smart about how Feyre was feeling, and I wish he would have kind of given her a chance to go outside and fight alongside him, and he just really was not giving her enough freedom. So I was disappointed in Tamlin throughout this book, because I really loved him in A Court of Thorns and Roses, and he's still one of my favorite male characters, but he was just not giving Feyre the freedom she deserved at this time, and he was adding to her anxiety. And so I just wish he would have been more like sympathetic to her and understood that she is strong enough to fight because she saved your butt under that mountain, so you should give her the freedom to go outside and not lock her in a house. And going along with that, and it might be kind of contradicting what I just said, but I was very disappointed in Feyre, and now I'm kind of explaining what I did in my review, the non-spoiler review, of why I felt like I was disappointed in her and why I felt like she was not trying to work out her problems. It was because she dropped Tamlin so easily. When she got locked up, she just ran away, and she didn't like try to fix her problems with Tamlin at all. And I felt like she was overreacting just a little bit. I mean, I understood that she was having a lot of anxiety, and being like basically a prisoner was making her anxious, but she just like loved him like that. And it was just kind of disappointing to me, because in A Court of Thorns and Roses they had this absolutely like beautiful romance, and she just loved him to death, and then suddenly she's just like, peace out, I'm gone, not gonna deal with this anymore. And I was like, she really has changed, huh? I guess that's all you can really say. Like, I do get that her experience under the mountain really changed her, along with her feelings for Tamlin, unfortunately, but I just wish she would have worked out her problems with Tamlin, especially because she initially loved him so much, and she just like left like he was a piece of garbage. So that like really made me upset, but at the same time I can't understand why she ran away, because she was not feeling good being locked in that place. But it's just, yeah, I wish she would have not run away from her problems like that and not dropped Tamlin so easily. So then we get to the wedding, and I love the fact that she hated her wedding dress. I thought that was really funny and kind of sad, because when you're the bride you should not be hating your wedding dress. But maybe she didn't really care how she looked, but she did not like her dress. I thought that was so funny. And the whole time during the wedding scene, at this time I was still shipping her with Tamlin. So when she was like, this is a mistake, I can't do this, while she was about to go like walking down the aisle, I was like, no, why are you feeling like that? Don't panic. Stop panicking. It's gonna be alright. But then Rhysand shows up, and I then understood that they were not actually going to get married that day. And he takes her away because it's the week of their bargain. And so that point on is basically where she starts interacting more with Rhysand. She started living with him after she got locked up, and she runs away with him, and she starts fighting alongside him. And for this reason, I really liked how Rhysand was the total opposite of Tamlin, and he was willing to give her the freedom that she deserved. And I liked how he was just very understanding of what she went through, and how she has these powers. She has all these powers that the High Lords of the courts all gave her, and she has a reason to use them now so she can fight alongside Rhysand in protecting his city and the Night Court. And I was just glad he understood, unlike Tamlin, that she should be out there and using her powers, and she should not be locked up in the house. And it was at that point that I kind of was getting the sense that Rhysand was not as bad as a person as I thought he was. I also found the bargain, the bond, very interesting, how they were able to speak to each other through their minds. Some of these things they said to each other were so interesting, and how they were able to write notes to each other and then send them off, and it was exactly like just text messaging. Like, they were basically text messaging. So I thought that was really funny, and some of the messages they sent to each other were absolutely hilarious. How they always got so flirty only when they were writing notes to each other. Never in person did they get flirty at all. I mean, I guess sometimes they did, but most of the time is when they were writing messages to each other. And one of the parts when they were writing the messages to each other was how they each wanted to lick each other, and I was like, this is hilarious. This is so golden right now. That was one of my favorite parts. And I absolutely love how Rhysand is not as much as a bad boy as I thought he was, but he's just a really big flirt. And some of the things he said to Feyre were absolutely just hilarious, and how Feyre handled it was funny too. Yeah, I really enjoyed the basically text messaging that they did together. Going into some of the other kind of relationships that were going on. One of my new ships is Cassian and Nesta, which is Feyre's sister. Hopefully they get together in the third book, because their relationship is so funny, and I think they'd make just this perfect couple, because they have this kind of hate relationship right now in the book, but some of my favorite relationships is one that turns to like hate and like resentment into love. So I'm kind of hoping that there will be some kind of love story thrown in there about them in the latter book. I think that'll be just so cool, and I think they will work so good together, because they kind of have very similar personalities. So hopefully we'll get to see more of them in the last book. I think that relationship could really work. So now getting into probably like either one of them or probably my favorite part in the book, which I was totally just like fangirling on, is when Feyre found out that Rhysand is actually her mate. And I said in my A Court of Thorns and Roses review that I had this suspicion that they were mates. I got this suspicion after hearing, I think it was Catty Tastic's review on A Court of Thorns and Roses, how she kind of thought that Rhysand imprinted on her, and so it was kind of like that, how I got the idea that maybe they're actually mates. And I did kind of get that idea towards the very end of Court of Thorns and Roses, when Feyre is seeing Rhysand for the last time, and he suddenly, like, before he disappears, he gets totally shocked by something, and it was because, and I'm so glad we finally figured out, it's because the mating bond between them was finally, like, clicked in place. And we didn't know it at that time, but getting to know it now, I'm just like, totally blew my mind. So I thought that part was so interesting, and I was actually kind of, even though I was shipping her with Tamlin more honestly, I was glad that they were mates, because I was just really starting to fall in love with them together as a couple throughout this book, which I wasn't sure if I actually was going to at first, but they just seemed to work very, very well together. And at the beginning of like their like romance or whatever, I didn't really see a love connection at first. It was more just lust, but I loved how it just gradually just turned into just them loving each other. It was just so beautiful. And because after seeing them together and realizing that now they are actually mates, I've come to accept that her and Tamlin are just not going to work out anymore, even though I absolutely, and I still just love their romance in A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I've come to just accept that they're just not right for each other anymore, especially after realizing that Rhysand is actually her mate. I mean, once you kind of realize that this is your mate and who you belong with entirely, there's nothing really you can do. And because of that, just being with anyone else is just not going to work out anymore because you have that strong bond with someone now. So I just come to accept that. And I love Feyre and Tamlin's relationship in A Court of Thorns and Roses for what it was, but I have been leaning gradually more with her being with Rhysand, and I'm really just okay with it now. However, that being said, I still, unlike I feel like a lot of people, I still don't hate Tamlin. He did do stupid things in this book, but I still love him as a character, and I think he has the capability of redeeming himself for a lot of stupid things he did in A Court of Mist and Fury in the third book, and hopefully he does, because I just love him and I want him to realize his mistakes on what he did to Feyre, and just hopefully that happens. And now going into the part where I legitimately cried. I did cry in this book, and I was not expecting to cry in this book, and that was when Rhysand was explaining to Feyre the mating bond and how he would dream of her way before she ever came into the fairy realm, before Tamlin took her as prisoner. He was having dreams about her way before that, way before the book A Court of Thorns and Roses, and he was always having this feeling afterward that he was like bonded with her in some way, and how he went to the festival that starts with a C or something. I can't remember what it's called, but he went to see her at the festival when she was still in the spring court with Tamlin, and how he sought her out because he needed to see her, and why he did the things to protect her under the mountain. And when she had died, like, he was absolutely just so upset, and I just got so emotional at that part, because that was the point, the right exact point in the book where I completely fell in love with Rhysand right then. I mean, he was growing on me throughout this whole book. At that point is when I just fell in love with him, because it was then that I realized that the shady things he had been doing in A Court of Thorns and Roses, there was a reason to it, and why he did what he did was just totally explained. And that has actually never happened to me with a character before, where I initially did not like them at first, and I realized that the way they did what they did is actually for a good thing. And I was like, I just wanted to hug him, and I was crying because he was being so emotional with Feyre and just like completely spilled his love out for her. And I don't know, that was just one of the most amazing parts in the book, because it's very, very rare for me to get that emotional. Unless a character dies, I get very emotional with that. But I've never gotten like so emotional, just crying, like legit tears coming down my face for a character admitting that they love someone. And so yeah, that is the point where I absolutely just loved Rhysand entirely, and I really, really right then came to accept that him and Feyre are so good for each other, because of this mating bond, and how it just all makes sense because of that bond, why they should be together now. And yeah, I just ship them together now. I mean, it's okay now that she's just not with Tamlin anymore. They're good. They're good. They should be together. So I just absolutely love them, and I love Rhysand now. He's so amazing. I also love going in with that part in the book, how he was Feyre was offering him food, and Rhysand's like, when the female or girl offers her mate food, it means she accepts the mating bond. And she was like, okay. And then after he explains his love for her and all that, she was like, gives him the food, and I was like, it's just so cute. So much cute and fluffiness in that book. And I know this isn't like a strict like romance or contemporary book, but that part was just so fluffy, and that was just my favorite part of the book, honestly. It was so, so good. It just gave me all the feels. And now, finally, going away from that, we're getting to the end of the book, and when we find out that Tamlin is actually working for the king so he could be reunited with Feyre. And I was like, what is going on at that part? I'm like, Tamlin, why are you doing this? Why are you working for the King of Hybern, he is just so evil, and I was just freaking out. Like, how can you do that? I understand why he was doing it, because he still loved Feyre, and he was able to get her back in this way. I don't remember how, but if he did work for the King of Hybern, then he could have her back, supposedly. And he was being stupid, but you kind of have to understand the fact that he's in love, and you do stupid things when you're in love. But this was just really dangerous, giving up, basically just giving up the Spring Court and putting his court in danger just to have Feyre back. But I don't know, it was still stupid, even though he was doing it out of love. And then during this part, her sisters turned into fairies, and that was completely just bizarre. When they were putting her into that cauldron, I actually thought they were gonna kill them, actually. And when they did come out as fae, I was very, very glad that they did not actually get killed. But at the same time, being fairies is probably gonna be hard for them. But man, I love her sisters, and I was just very glad that they did not die. And then after this all happens, when Elaine comes out, she's the first one to be turned into fae, and Lucien looks at her, and he's like, you are my mate. And I was just like, what is going on right here? What? And I was really happy, because I love Lucien so much, and I love Elaine, and then being mates, I'm really interested to see how that's going to play out, and I'm sure it'll be more like, we'll go into it more in the third book, but I'm excited to see what their relationship is going to be like. I think they could work very well together, and yeah, that just makes me so happy, because I do love Lucien, and after he had lost his other lover when she was killed before his eyes, I just wanted him to be with someone, and so I think Elaine could really fill that void, and Elaine is so, so sweet. She's one of the sweetest, kindest characters in this book, so she would probably just treat Lucien well, and I hope they get along, and I'm excited to see their relationship in the third book. And so still during that scene, we get the very suspenseful part where Feyre was, in order to keep her friends of the Night Court safe, she sacrificed herself and told the king to break the bond. And that was a very just suspenseful moment, because I was like, we spent 500 pages of this book getting to know Rhysand and Feyre as a couple, and now their bond is going to be broken. It completely sucks, but I was really glad when it turns out actually that the king only broke the bargain, not the mating bond. And I was kind of suspecting throughout that whole scene that the mating bond wasn't going to be broken. It was actually going to be the bargain, because I don't feel like it's even possible to break a mating bond, because that bond is so, so deep that there's no possible way that it could be broken. And I was really glad that it wasn't. And her and Rhysand are actually still mates, but now she is left with Tamlin back to the Spring Court, and she's telling him that she is still in love with him, that she never loved Rhysand, and she is actually lying, and she is spying on the Spring Court. And Lucien has this total suspicion that she is actually lying, because he can't really believe that she would come back to him after she has been mated with Rhysand. And so I am really just excited to see how the third book plays out. I know it is a year away, and it's going to be so hard to wait that long, because this is honestly my favorite trilogy series right now. I love these books, and yeah, I'm so excited to see the third book and how it ends. I know it is probably going to be awesome. I can just feel that this series is just going to have this epic conclusion. I am so excited for it. Really looking forward to it. I think it'll be my #1 anticipated book for next year. And so that finally ends this video. This is going to be a long video. I know it is, because I have so much to say. But yeah, I just